All right, so now we're ready to do our highlights layer. So we're gonna make a new layer. It's gonna be set on top of everything else. We're gonna leave it on normal. And I'm actually going to use the fat pencil brush, which is just, all it is a modified technical pencil that has the max width increased. Okay, that's all that is. So we have a new layer here, and what we're gonna do, the same thing as before, only this time we're gonna go even brighter with these, and a little bit warmer still. And these are gonna be the layers that are our brightest highlights, right? These are the areas where the light is really just reflecting right off of the surface and creating this really bright light setup, okay? Now in this layer especially, you wanna break this up with texture because that's where we read most of the texture in an object is in the highlights, right? Where however the light kind of breaks up on that surface is kind of how our eye interprets whatever it is that we're looking at. And if it just looks, really smooth, we have some really smooth glossy sort of highlights, then it's going to send the message that the surface is really smooth and glossy, which in this case it's not. So we want to make sure that we're really trying to light that accordingly so that people aren't getting that impression. Okay. You can see here I'm trying to break it up a little bit as we go along. Here along his eye. His eye we're going to do on a separate layer along with his claws and horns and stuff. His actual eyeball, the little tiny part in the middle. So for now I'm just going to leave it be. Not worry about that too much. You can see this is really the layer where things start to kind of come alive, in my opinion. It starts to feel a lot more real. And it's kind of where you start getting the detail. Because even though the rest of this looks pretty painterly, it's this layer where we have this little tiny bits of texture that really starts to make things feel like there's a lot of detail going on, even though it's really fairly simple. As far as painting goes, what we're doing here, but it definitely takes it to another level just by breaking things up a little bit, giving it a little bit of texture in there. Few areas on the jaw here. I'm not really changing this one that much with my color picker because it's kind of the brightest we're going to be going, right? It's not really not affected by hue that much because it's kind of our brightest point. So I'm not too worried about that. So you can go ahead and zoom in and out just to check from a distance, see how well things are looking. Excellent. Let's move on down here to his arm. And I'm trying to still decide if I want the scales to be really shiny or if I want them to be a little bit more matte and kind of have the skin beneath and next to the scales be shiny. I'm not 100% sure what it is we want to go with. I think we're going to go with the scales being kind of shiny. Okay, I'm going to get my airbrush tool and just soften these up a little bit. I think what we need to do also, it's just a little too bright, so You know what, let's just lower the opacity on the brush actually. There we go. Catch a few spots on some of these scales here. These wrinkles. All right, and then up here on his neck. All right, excellent. That really starts to give him some pretty cool sort of glossy effect. In some parts, we don't want to do that on all the parts, but just on some of these scales so they feel a little bit more shiny. And even still, I don't know if I want them that glossy, so I'm just going to break them up with a little bit of texture. I'll zoom in more so you can kind of see what I'm doing here. The reason I zoom out so much and work like this is because it gives me a better idea of the overall image and what it's looking like from a distance instead of getting so caught up and focused on one little detailed area. I want to be able to focus on the whole and not just one spot. Coming down here on his arm. Okay, his little fingers here. Let's see, whoops, where else do we need to hit it? Let's do, I think we need a little bit more on this back part of his head. Just a touch. Okay, and a little bit more right here as well. Okay, excellent. And this front part, I want it to be pretty bright. Like that. There we go. Really liking that a lot. Okay. Excellent. Catch a few spots down in here. Over here on the top of his claws, on his hand. Over here along his wing. Top of this ridge as well. You want to blow out those highlights there a little bit. Okay. You can see that as I go, I'm also painting over some of these lines, because eventually we just want to be able to turn off the line art and have the rest of this still kind of stand up on its own. Okay. Get a few spots over here in his leg. Get the airbrush and pull that back just a touch. Okay, and do the same thing down here on his hand too. A little bit too strong. There we go. Okay, hit a few of these spots down here on his tail. All right, awesome. I still think we'd maybe need a few more spots over here on some of these scales on his leg. Okay, that looks better. All right, and perhaps just a little bit more over here on his hand. Okay. Excellent. Perfect. So I think that looks pretty good. We can turn that on and off and see the difference it makes. If you think you did yours too bright, you can always lower the opacity a little bit. Okay. And there you go. So that's it for our highlights. And I'll see you guys in the next lecture.